We welcome you in the Sam and Cole podcast following the Jaguars' 42-39 loss to the Titans. We're brought to you, as always, by Champion Cycling. 3 locations, Arlington, Mandarin, and the Beach, and a great time if you have a cyclist in your family, if you are buying for a cyclist, or if you are yourself a cyclist, put it on your wish list. Stop on by. Everything from, every kind of bike you can just about imagine, plus accessories galore, too. So great thing to do this time of year. And Sam, it may be about time that Jaguars fans may want to start getting out and biking on Sundays, the way things have been going.
I watch the games with a Jaguar fan, and every time they say the same thing. You know, I'm not going to waste my Sundays anymore. I mean, it's just it's enough to drive you crazy, and it's frustrating. And this is kind of just trying to sum up for something that you have said a couple of times as well. Look, teams need to create an identity, and the Jaguars, it's hit or miss every week. One side of the ball or one person or whatever. They don't, they're not a team. Even though in the last few weeks they were a team that really looked like that they were creating a very tough against the run identity, and then that disappeared today. So. They need to concentrate on being something. And you score 39 points and lose, clearly your defense didn't have a good game. Sometimes you get in games like that, you hope you win them. But the Jaguars just don't have an identity that they can lean on. And I don't know, Cole, is that because they're a developing team, or is that just because they've got guys all over the place and they haven't really concentrated on one thing?
Well, to me, if you were just to assess the talent that the Jaguars have right now, they should be a team that should stop the run well. They better, right, because they don't rush the passer. And they should, be an aggressive downfield passing game as far as the offense is concerned. Because that's where the greatest talent is right now. When you talk about Allen Robinson, who became the first since Jimmy Smith in 2005 to go over 1,000 yards today. Talk about Julius Thomas, who has been better here over the last he's looked like the guy that the Jaguars expected him to be when they signed him to the big free agent deal. Hearns, when he's healthy, obviously didn't play today. But that's where the greatest talent is. And I know I've been calling for more TJ Yeldon in certain times, and you certainly can do that. But this should be a team that that should do that. What's holding them back right now from that personality, as far as I'm concerned, offensively, is that offensive line is, different performance-wise on any given week. Right. Sometimes I thought they did a pretty good job today. The Bortles avoided pressure very well for the most part. He was only sacked a couple of times. They've got to be better as far as that's concerned, and I think that will be to me, that's the number one area of need of address in the offseason is offensive line. Pass rush is second, but again, pass rush, you're going to get Dante Fowler back. You don't know if he'll be Dante Fowler of old, but at least you have an expectation that you already have somebody there waiting to return that'll help that part of the defense.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, next year you get two first-round picks that'll take the field for the first time, which is great. But you've got to have something that settles in that you can count on every week. And we thought it was stopping the run. Maybe Senderick Marks is a big part of that, even though they've done it without him for a couple of weeks. But, obviously, I think we're far enough into the season, Cole, now with 4 games to play, to clearly identify where the Jaguars need improving next year and what they're concentrate on in the offseason. Obviously, they need another big defensive lineman, interior pass rusher probably. They need somebody in that what Gus Bradley likes to call the Leo position, because neither Andre Branch and certainly Chris Clemens wouldn't have been on this team if Dante Fowler was healthy, and he hasn't performed the way he did last year. So now you're looking at maybe getting another guy who can step in that Leo spot. And I agree with you. Over time, the Jaguars need a safety. Is James Sample that guy? We don't know, because he really didn't play at all this year. So, and do they still lean on Cyprien, even though it's proved game in and game out that he either can't assess the game situation enough, or he just can't cover a tight end in those situations that he's asked to do it. And, so obviously they need some help there, and they probably have to figure out what they want to do on the offensive line. Who's developing, who's not performing, and in essence, can you upgrade easily, with somebody that you can plug in? AJ Cann, is he going to be a starter next year? Probably, but it might be at left guard if they can find somebody to plug in there somewhere else. So left tackle obviously is a thing they're going to have to decide about. They're going to have to decide about Wisniewski, who's playing under a 1-year contract.
I fully expect them, by the way, to go after Alex Mack.
And I do too. But again, why would the Browns they didn't let him go last time?
I don't think they'll have the same ability.
Fervor to keep
the same ability just based on the remember last time it was exclusive rights or restricted, whatever it was. They had
the franchise tag on him. I think
they had the chance to match based on the way that's not going to happen this time around.
Okay, well then, so let's say they do bring in a center. So then all of a sudden you've got Parnell, Lindner, Mack, Cann, and you have to make a decision about
named later. Yeah,
got to make a decision about Jokel. So, we're far enough into the season where we've really been able to identify, okay, these are the glaring spots. And I also think, Cole, that next year, because of the more emphasis that will be put on winning games, and that the growth of guys like Allen Robinson and Bortles, even though he still drives me crazy sometimes, like that fourth down play at the end of the game. Come on, Blake, throw the football. Yeah. I mean, you're going to go down. I don't care if you throw it straight up in the air, but don't take the ball to the ground. That's the only thing you can't do, because then the game's over. So, I think he's fine. Yeldon continues to improve. Julius Thomas, they can develop some tight ends if they think Marcedes' career in Jacksonville is over. But when you start looking at what they have going forward, they probably feel like that they can plug some people in for the short term. Whereas and Ndamukong Suh, not part of their thought process. Andre Johnson, Reggie Wayne, I know there is a cap on age when it comes to what the Jaguars are willing to do. But if you have the ability to sign a guy, I think a guy like Greg Jennings, who they tried to sign in the offseason, they probably next year will be more aggressive in that, you know what I'm talking about, that sliver. A veteran player who can come in and maybe play for a couple of years.
Veteran, not a superstar, but a guy who's already shown he can play in the league and be productive.
Yeah, and be productive.
And really, that's, for the most part, that's where
Yep.
All right, got you back now. So the most troubling trend to me is that they win when Bortles doesn't play well, and they lose when he does, and that's really troubling because you don't see that very often in the modern NFL.
Well, that's a really good point, and I wonder if it's you hope that all these things you can attribute to being a young team, but I don't know that you can. I mean, Bortles goes out there and plays pretty well today. Obviously, they figured out some things in the red zone. I thought basically it was better decision making by Blake and a little bit more imagination down there with moving him in the pocket a little bit. And that's why I hated the 2-point play. And by the way, I thought it was a bad decision to go for 2 there anyway. Don't chase points early in the game. You're going to get other opportunities. Don't chase them until you got to have them. So, but that's another one of those situations where the card says, if you score and you're down by 2, go for it.
Right.
And I just think that's one of the things where the head coach says, "Nah, we're not doing that."
The card,
the extra point.
The card should stay in your pocket until the fourth quarter.
Right.
But
something like that.
That brings us to the kicker. Jason Myers has missed 6 extra points now, and I realize that more extra points are being missed because they moved it back. But
anybody missed that many?
Nobody has missed 6 except for Jason Myers. Even if you really like his potential or his whatever else, I guess you don't do anything at this point of the season because you are guaranteed of not having a winning record. You win out, you're 8-8 at best. If you still feel like you're in the playoff race, maybe you just say, hey, you know what? We're bringing somebody in who can make extra points. And Jason Myers is our kicker going forward, but we got to have somebody who can make extra points.
I don't know. I think you sent a wrong message to your team there. I think you've got to bring some guys in and tell Jason, hey, we'll see you in training camp next year, and cut him and give him another opportunity later, because right now he's cost you, an opportunity at least to win 2 football games.
And he's won one for you with a long field goal that he that he caused the opportunity by missing.
So, yeah. So I will. I mean, you're right, but you can't get too attached to kickers. You got to look at these guys as there's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of guys with good legs, and there's a lot of guys who develop. And I think I almost feel like the Jaguars got caught in this. We're going to steal one here and surprise everybody. We're going to sign a kid from Marist who's been out of the league, who's been kicking in the AFL, and we found him and nobody else did. Maybe in the 70s and 80s when Gil Brandt was beating the bushes for, players who turned out to be like Otis Sistrunk from No College, USA.
University of Mars.
The University of Mars, right. So, all of a sudden, that's fine. But now there's kickers. Go get one. Get a guy who can kick, a guy who's going to, miss 1 extra point in 16 games. I get it. But, Myers, and you said, he's got Steve Saxon, and I sent back the Chuck Knobloch reference.
I went to Mackie Sasser after that.
There are
a lot of people on Twitter. You're right. By the way, Twitter, which is probably average, the average age of our Twitter followers is probably about 32 or something.
Right.
And there's a lot of people going, where are these guys?
By the way, that's one of the greatest fan things I've ever seen. Went to see the Braves and the Dodgers when they used to let us cover stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Went up to Atlanta to cover them. And behind first base, every time the Dodgers would take the field, there were like 8 guys who held up a bed sheet with a bullseye on it. And at the top it said Sax. And at the bottom it said here. So.
right, we back here?
Yep, there we go.
I don't know if that's on your end or my end.
All my stuff stays pretty solid. Did you hear my Steve Sachs story?
Yes, and then it dropped off. So we'll pick it up from there.
Yeah.
So they've got to find some way to not Steve Sachs and not Mackey Sasser and not Chuck Knobloch
right
away with the kicker, because it's
and you think about it, Cole, and I've mentioned this in each game where he's kicking from. A couple weeks ago it was the right hash, so he could aim at the right post and hook it in there. This week it was the left hash, so he could aim at maybe he had more room to hook it in there. That means that the guy's got no confidence from any spot on the field.
Yeah.
Pick a spot, kick it for the rest of the year.
He's like a free throw shooter, deciding that if he squares up in the middle of the basket, or if he takes a couple of steps left and shoots it from on an angle, that's going to somehow work out better. I'm trying to remember who it was. There was somebody in the NBA who was struggling so much with free throws that he wound up basically taking it from the far left side.
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe 10 or 15 years ago. From the far left side, and his thought was, I can hit a jumper from the left elbow, but I can't make free throws, so I'm going to go over there to the left elbow basically and shoot free throws.
And there's some guys who they take a step back from the free throw line. They go, it's too close or whatever it is. But yeah, you can't let your kicker impact your thought process and how you play the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And that's what happened today. But then again, the Jaguars took the lead. They got exactly what they wanted: a defensive turnover and a score. They were 6 for 6 in the red zone. I mean, there were just all kinds of positive things. Bortles throws 5 touchdown passes, sets the record for touchdown passes in one season by a Jaguar quarterback. Allen Robinson goes over 1,000 yards, first time since 2005. He catches 3 touchdown passes. Clearly, there's some good things happening that the Jaguars can build on, but you've got to have some identity that you can lean on, and it just kind of disappeared today when it comes to being able to stop the run.
All right, let's talk little college bowls, because
one other thing I wanted to mention that I thought Mike Mularkey's offensive game plan was very well defined, because the short passing game that Mariota is good at is what the Jaguars have a difficult time with all the time. And anymore, throwing the ball 5 yards or 3 yards is as good as handing it off to a running back. So I thought Mularkey was really devising a good plan, taking advantage of what his guys could do, and also what the Jaguars have a tough time. He didn't try to force the ball downfield, didn't try to run it, although they ran it very effectively. But putting his tight ends and some of his slot guys in one-on-one situations against guys is just a good, solid offensive game plan.
And by the way, as I said after the Thursday night game, Mariota throwing the ball deep doesn't scare me at all. I don't know why you would ever. Running deep is pretty good. He can run it deep. He just can't throw it deep. All right, college bowls.
All right.
Let's start here in Jacksonville with the Tax Slayer Bowl. Everybody in town will still call it the Gator Bowl. Georgia, Penn State. On its face, it's a great matchup of traditional power teams. I think it's an odd choice to have Georgia coming back to Jacksonville if you want to, bring in a lot of out of town business, because Georgia people have a certain expectation for what they're going to experience when they come here, and I found that to be very strange.
Well, they've played here before, and same thing when they bring Florida here. But I do think that the bowl experience that people are expecting is different than their Florida-Georgia experience. So, I know what you're saying, but at the same time,
I mean, if it was bad for Virginia Tech to be here back-to-back, basically ACC championship, right? How different is it for somebody who comes on here every year for Florida-Georgia?
Yeah, and if you it's different because I think the experience is different. It's not as many students who come to the game.
Yeah.
It's more alumni based. It's more based on the holiday, and the way that Rick Catlett and company sets the whole thing up. It's a completely different experience than it is. But I certainly can see your point. But then again, if you're going to be tied into the Southeastern Conference, and and to the Big Ten the way they were, then, you know, Georgia is a better choice than probably anybody else who's sitting out there.
I think there are three criteria. I think I've had this conversation with Rick before. Three main criteria to, what they want to accomplish with a bowl matchup. Bringing people to town, economic development from that standpoint, TV ratings and attractiveness of a TV matchup, and ability to sell a lot of tickets to people who want to be here, whether they're coming in or whether they're local. I think they'll sell a fair number of tickets for local folks, but if you recall, was it 2000? I think it was it 2010 or 11 when Florida played in the bowl game,
right?
And there was not a lot of travel in. It was a lot of folks who came in day of to play to go to that game. So I think it'll hurt the economic impact within the city for that. But I think there are a lot of Penn State alumni. Whether they have the second or third biggest alumni in the country, there'll be a lot of Penn State folks who will be at this game.
Would like to come here, and in addition to that, it's a very attractive television matchup just because of the two names that you put on the piece of paper.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that is, I mean, and that feels like a New Year's Day kind of bowl game,
right? It feels
of old.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that means that's the Outback Bowl, or one of those that has traditionally gotten some good solid matchups, and that's what people are going to look at.
Yeah, that will have some attraction in terms of looking at it on its surface. Florida gets Michigan,
right?
Another one that feels like one of those New Year's Day bowl games of old, with Florida in in the state that they're in after what's happened the last couple of games. Going to be interesting to see how they bounce back after being absolutely manhandled, their offense in particular, by Florida State and by Alabama. But they also gave up big yards running the football. So we'll see what Michigan can do. And then Florida State and Houston, which I think
it's in the Citrus Bowl, by the way.
What's that? Oh, Michigan and Florida at Citrus Bowl,
right?
And then I guess it's back to being called the Peach Bowl, or is I don't know if Chick-fil-A still got a sponsorship, but it used to be the Peach Bowl, and it was a Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Anyway, the one in Atlanta will have FSU and Houston, which I think is a really intriguing matchup.
Well, Florida State can play power football, and Houston likes to throw that thing and score 1,000 points.
Yeah.
Well, Florida State's got the athletes to make it a track meet if they want, but probably Jimbo Fisher would prefer to try to shut Houston's offense down a little bit by putting some pressure on the quarterback. Who knows? But like you said, that's a fun, intriguing kind of game. Hey, I'll watch that game if you know anything about football, because it brings a lot of different stuff to the table.
And Houston just signed Tom Herman, the head coach, to a new deal. Who he was being courted by a lot of folks. I think there was some rumor that Georgia was interested in him at one point. And then Miami, Washington State, Sun Bowl doesn't do much for me.
Except that it's in El Paso.
It is in El Paso, which will give it some nice vistas when you shoot that high 50-yard line camera out over the distance, and you'll see the landscapes. Then, of course,
you can look over Juarez,
Mexico. Clemson, Oklahoma, and Alabama, Michigan State. Only the second time that Alabama and Michigan State will ever have met.
And people forget that, Nick Saban did coach there. And the funny story about that allegedly was when he left Michigan State to take the job at LSU, he apparently sent the plane for all the assistants to come join him there, and none of them followed him to LSU because they were sick and tired of working for him. And who replaced him up there? Is that Bobby Johnson? Was that the guy that Spurrier didn't know his name? I think that might have been who replaced
the next one. Yeah, may have been. I like Alabama, and I haven't decided Clemson, Oklahoma yet.
Oklahoma, that's quite a rebound from losing to Texas, and then Texas turns around and beats Baylor, which is kind of a massive upset as well. But that's the. I guess you can throw the rivalry into that, but if you look at where Oklahoma was maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago in that top 25, a lot of things had to go right for them, but mainly they had to win, right?
And they did.
Yeah. So.
All right. Front you want to touch on?
What's that?
Anything else on the bowl front that you want to touch on?
No, I think this whole college football playoff is playing itself out to the point where, as Jimbo Fisher said after they lost to Clemson, my fear is that every other game, if you're not still competing for, or you're in the college football playoffs, lacks some meaning. And to me, that's where the bowl games have to really work hard to stay relevant. Because
I've got the solution for that, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Put them in it.
12 team, 11 conferences and an at-large.
I've always liked your plan, and I wouldn't even mind a 16-team playoff. But that the 12, the way your idea is, I think that it's a good idea, and I don't know if they'll go to it, but at least
they're not, because they won't give the smaller conferences the opportunity to compete. I mean, they just won't
to be in there. Yeah, to share in the revenue.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think bowl games really have to work hard to stay relevant once you get to the college football playoff. I mean, don't you think that the Gator Bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl is a fun and exciting, kind of matchup between two, as you said, legacy college football powers?
Yeah.
And that means what?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing except the game itself, right?
And, well, you know what coaches will tell you? The most important thing about playing one of those bowl games is you get extra practice time.
They get that extra month of practice, right?
Start building in for next year. All right, next week it's the Jaguars hosting the Indianapolis Colts. The first place Colts. We'll see how much in first place they are based on what happens going forward. But Jaguars with 2 home games remaining in the season, and we'll see how it all plays out next week, and we'll of course have a podcast for you. And because it's a home game, we'll be periscoping.
Yep.
So be sure to follow Sam on Twitter at Sam Kavaris. Follow me on Twitter at Cole Pepper, and we'll be periscoping live the podcast, and then of course also appearing as you find your podcast now, wherever that may be, on iTunes or Stitcher, or if you had to deal with us last week having technical issues on both podcasts last week, 2 different things. I'm firing our tech senior vice president of technical support, which is me, and we'll try to get something figured out as far as that's concerned.
By the way, no Andrew Luck next week, already announced.
No Andrew Luck, so
won't play. So the Jaguars' home games are against the Colts. Winnable?
Sure. Yeah, I guess
potentially, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The Falcons. Winnable?
Yeah, Jekyll and Hyde team of the year. Falcons.
Something's going on there. Which we don't know. At New Orleans, not a good team, but hard to win on the road.
Yeah,
right?
Probably not winnable there.
At Houston.
Yeah, again, Houston's not very good.
Right, but might be still in the hunt for some sort of playoff, even though they lost today. So, if the Jaguars are trying to get to 5 wins, which would be the first time they've done that since 2011. It's an uphill struggle across the board.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, 5.5 was our number. I think based on some of the progress, particularly with Bortles this year, I think we both believe that unless they get blown out and the team turns on Gus, that they're not going to make any changes as far as that's concerned in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. It's no layup to get to 5.
I'm just telling you, those guys in Vegas, they know what they're talking about.
They do.
I mean, you look at the over/under on Jaguar wins. Look at today's game. Jaguars were a 2.5-point favorite, and they don't cover.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Gator game against Alabama. We're a 15-point dog. They don't cover. I mean, those guys in Las Vegas are SMRT smart.
They didn't build those fancy hotels by losing games. All right.
All right.
That'll do it for the Sam and Cole podcast, brought to you as always by our friends at Champion Cycling. 3 locations, Arlington, Mandarin, and the beach. Sam will be buying me something nice this Christmas.
No doubt. Exactly. All right. Thanks, Cole.
That'll do it. Thanks a lot. And we'll talk to you next time right here on the Sam and Cole podcast.